The following program does not necessarily reflect the opinions and viewpoints of the staff and management of the station.
Welcome to the wonderful world of seniors, the best of all worlds. You now have the time, resources, and ability to enjoy what you have worked for all your life. So let's explore the many possibilities available to seniors on Senior World Radio. Senior World Radio is your source for senior citizens-related topics, information, and entertainment. Now, here is your host of Senior World Radio, Glenn Howard.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I am delighted to have a special guest that, well, for me, it's one of the most important guests I think I've had in a long time because of his experiences and its significance for everybody. I'm talking about a gentleman here by the name of Ron Grant. I met Ron back in 2007, I think it was. He was working as the chaplain for one of our Oklahoma prisons. And he had invited me down to do a seminar on prayer ministries, which frankly was a very exciting experience for me because, you know, I expected everybody in prison to be hardcore prisoners, certainly not spiritual. In fact, I felt anybody who was being spiritual probably was an act to try to get out of prison. And man, was I blown away. I discovered some of the most spiritually mature people who had found Jesus Christ as their personal Savior in prison, and it was amazing to me. But the thing that really did impact me was the announcement Ron shared with me that he had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And his comment at that time was people who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease probably have a life expectancy of about 5 years. Now, I remember sitting there looking at Ron and thinking, you know, what a horrible thing. Ron, I don't know how old he was. I would guess probably in late 50s, early 60s. I don't know. Certainly not a kid, but not an old man by any stretch of the imagination. And I remember looking at him and thinking, you know, to have a sentence like that you've got Alzheimer's, it's been confirmed, that's all you've got to look forward to, maybe a 5-year thing. It was one of those horrifying things. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to follow up or know much about Ron after that time until here just a few days ago when we were visiting with Mark Freed, who is the president of the Alzheimer's Association. And we were talking about, is there any hope for Alzheimer's patients? Are things improving? And he mentioned a guy by the name of Ron Grant, who he said is really breaking all the rules and is establishing a new approach to dealing with Alzheimer's that is working very successful. And suddenly I realized we were talking about one and the same guy. And so I immediately got on the phone, tried to get hold of him and his wife, Vicki, see if I could get them in the studio because I think they've got a story that you need to hear. And well, they're right here in the studio with me right now. Ron, Vicki, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
It's so good to have you. And, you know, talking about one of those conditions that people, when they hear the word Alzheimer's, I think that's more frightening for most people than even the word cancer because to at least feel like you're understanding what's going on and in control of your thinking has some benefits over it. But let's go back and start at the very beginning. You were first diagnosed with Alzheimer's when?
It was in October of 2007. I was 55 years old at the time.
55
Yes,
years
sir.
old.
Yes, sir.
Why did you have this diagnosis? Why did you even bother to have the test? What was happening?
Well, one particular event with my wife and daughter kind of keyed me to something being wrong. We was having a discussion one day, and my daughter was telling a story, and I said, wait just a minute. I wasn't there, so you need to go back and tell me. Now, I've been married now for over 43 years, so I have 2 grown daughters, and it's not too uncommon for Daddy to be left out of the story. You know, it's not uncommon at all. So I stopped my daughter, and I said, no, I wasn't there. You tell me the story. And she looked at me real funny and said, Daddy, you were there. And I said, well, you know, pacify me and act like I wasn't and tell me the story.
Tell me about it.
And I looked over at Vicki, and she kind of had a strange look on her face too, but she didn't say anything. So my daughter goes ahead and tells the story, and in the process of telling the story, I realized that I had been there. Now, I never did get the full picture. I got broken images of the event and never did completely put the picture together, but enough to know that, yes, I was there. We didn't say anything else about it and all, and so I just let it go. And there had been a few things at work that had mildly concerned me, nothing serious. And so it just so happened I was at my PCP for my annual physical, and he's been my PCP for years and knows my family, and been taking care of my mom and dad. And so after we were finishing up, he says, well, is there anything else we need to talk about? And I said, well, I may have some memory issues. He said, oh.
55 years old, okay.
And so he said, well, let me get you to a neurologist. And he told me who he wanted to send me to, and a very well-respected man here in Oklahoma City area, been practicing for years. Went to see him. He says, well, you're functioning too high a level here for me to give you the little test I give in the offices. But he said, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you a series of tests so we can figure out what it's not, because obviously something's bothering you, and let's find out what it's not. Because, it could be something as simple as thyroid not working properly. So we started with blood tests and kept on going through this. This took several months. And after I had an MRI, he called me up and said, there's some things on your MRI that, he said, now if you was 10, 15 years older, I might not think much of, but he said, it doesn't look right to me at your age. He said, I'd like to do a PET scan. I said, that's fine. So we did a PET scan, and it was from the PET scan that he and the radioneurologist determined that the damage that they saw was consistent with that of early Alzheimer's disease. So that's how I came about the diagnosis.
Wow. And Vicki, your husband, comes home and says, the doctors have just told me at the age of 55 I have Alzheimer's disease. And your imagination thought what?
Well, we received a letter in the mail with the diagnosis on a Saturday. So that day, I was just thinking about that. Our world, it just seemed like everything had just stopped that day. And we were just walking around numb, and everything was just still and stopped, and trying to sort through the diagnosis. And God was so gracious that, during that time, you're trying to find out how you're going to handle the fear, being overwhelmed, and not try to think too far ahead, but how do we handle this today? And it's been a process. It's about a 2-year process of just drawing into God, and I would spend time praying in the morning, at noon, at lunch, in the afternoon, come home, and just allowing, because I knew I had to work through that fear, because I wasn't raised around anybody with Alzheimer's, and here it is in my own home now with my husband at age 55, and so God's been gracious to us and just walked us through this.
Yeah. What kind of knowledge did you have about Alzheimer's before this?
I didn't have any knowledge.
How about you, Ron?
No, it didn't run in my family. We haven't had, as I know, there's no history of it. And I had not been around anybody with it. I'd known people say, well, so-and-so has Alzheimer's, but I wasn't around them to know what does that mean. My image of Alzheimer's was an old man sitting in a rocking chair drooling on himself, not knowing what's going on. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I've got to look forward to. Frightening.
Interesting. I can't, you're both, of course, very much people of faith.
Absolutely.
And I would guess that made a big difference in it, maybe a kind of almost a fatalistic, God's going to take care of it or whatever. But in your particular case, from what I understand from Mark Freed, you decided, no, we're not going to just sit by and watch this thing happen. Tell me about this process of thinking through it and deciding, let's see what we can do to fight this thing.
Okay. Well, first of all, it like as Vicki said, it just took us a while to even start wrapping our mind around this, because in essence, what I was told, and at that time, you ask, well, what can I expect next? Well, we can't tell you. Well, how long do I have to live? Well, we can't tell you. Well, what steps should I expect or be looking for? Well, we can't tell you, because it is a very individualistic disease, is how it approaches and how it affects people. So all we're getting is a bunch of no answers. And that's not their fault. It's just the truth. They didn't know. And so we go about trying to get our, durable power of attorney done and this kind of stuff. It's things that we knew we'd need done and get it taken care of at that time. We got onto that. And Vicki said, she got onto me, she said, you're just obsessed with this. Because I was reading everything I could because I wanted to know what was coming. And I said, no, I'm not obsessed. I said, I'm trying to take care of what I can take care of now. I said, please let me do that, and then we'll get on with living. And that's what we did.
So the idea of really facing the issue rather than trying to ignore it and hoping it will go away or whatever's going to be is going to be and you can't do anything about it was a major turning point as far as you're concerned.
Absolutely. Because here's the thing. You mentioned earlier that you made a comparison of Alzheimer's diagnosis and cancer.
Right.
Well, both of them are horrible diseases. I don't try to minimize that. But if I would have been given a diagnosis of cancer, I would have said, what's the treatment plan?
Yeah.
What's the game plan? Because there's always a game plan with cancer. And more often than not anymore, it's a successful game plan. Well, there is no cure. There's no medication that stops or slows down this disease. So, there is no game plan. I mean, medically, there's not a game plan out there. So you have to determine I guess in a nutshell, I cannot change the pathology of this disease. Medical community cannot change the pathology of it. It's going to take the course it's going to take. What I can do is change and have control over the response I have to the changes that's going on within me, my brain, and the functions that I can no longer do like I used to could do and things like that. I have control over how I react to that.
Yeah.
And that's what we chose to do. Instead of letting fear consume us and the uncertainties that are to come, I was able to come up here today, get on the elevator, and ride up here with you. Hey, that's an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment.
And so I just live with it, kind of, I guess more or less, if you want to say, you live within the moment.
I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio, visiting this morning with Ron and Vicki Grant. Ron was diagnosed in 2007 with Alzheimer's disease, and he decided not to just sit by and take it, but to try to fight it and do something about it. And I'm finding this to be a very interesting show, but we've got to take one of those breaks. We're going to be coming back in just a moment, so please stay right here with us.
You're nobody till somebody loves you.
Have you ever had a problem, but it seemed like there was no one who could help? You spent hours calling around, being referred from one place to the next. Well, not anymore. I want to tell you about a free and easy-to-use service in Oklahoma. 211 is a simple 3-digit phone number to get help or to give help when you don't know where to turn. Dialing 211 only takes a minute, and you are connected with a caring Oklahoman who will help you find the assistance you've been looking for. With access to over 13,000 programs, Heartline 211 can connect you to local resources for many different needs, including health care, food, counseling, rent assistance, disability assistance, job services, and much more. 211 is a service of Heartline, a United Way partner agency. 211, the right first call to get help or give help 24 hours a day.
Hi, my name's Jason Ledlow, president of UT Phone, the ultimate telephone service. We're proud to be a sponsor of Senior World Radio with Glenn Howard. UT Phone is dedicated to providing Oklahomans affordable telephone service all across our great state. We have Lifeline Home Phone service starting at just $1.95. That's right, just $1.95, and most of Oklahoma's seniors qualify for this reduced home phone service. They get to keep their old home phone number, and it even includes long distance. Another great feature of UT Phone's customers really like is that it includes repair service. That's right, any repairs at no additional charge. With many telephone services charging $40 to $50 per month, it makes sense to switch your service to UT Phone. This service is a federal program that is provided through the Universal Service Fund. There is only one per household, so make it UT Phone's home phone service for $1.95. Give us a call at 800-996-0098. Again, call 800-996-0098.
I've made up my mind.
And welcome back to Senior World Radio. I'm Glenn Howard, visiting today with Ron and Vicki Grant. I first met Ron about, back in 2007. I did a seminar for him. He was the chaplain for one of Oklahoma state prisons. And, I'd love to do a whole show just on prisons, and particularly on the people in prison, because I saw some of the most spiritually mature people I think I have met in churches any place in the country. There was inmates in the prison. They had found a relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's a whole show I'd love to do someday. But when I was visiting with Ron, he told me that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I remember the hopeless feeling that I had. It was just, I said something about, how long can you continue to work? And he said, well, I really don't know. And at that time, he was going ahead and making plans to retire. And I had lost contact with him, and frankly, it had been past the 5 years, and I kind of thought maybe he'd wound up in a home someplace, being cared for physically, but mentally no longer with us. And then talked to Mark Freed here the other day on this show, and he mentioned Ron and said he was an example of how a person can choose to fight the disease and can continue to function far beyond what medical society has thought was possible. And Ron, just before we took a break, you were commenting about how you decided not to really feel sorry for yourself, but to begin to face the issue, to begin to say, what can I do? And the very fact that there is something that you can do sounds to me like a kind of an empowering reality.
Oh, absolutely. The reality that Vicki and I had to come to was this, fairly simple. We trusted and believed God up to this point. Has God changed? No, He hasn't. Circumstances have changed, but God hasn't. And within that, if we trusted God before, we better trust Him now, and really need to trust Him a whole lot right now, because circumstances have changed. While circumstances caught us off guard, it didn't catch God off guard. So, I didn't do any yelling and screaming and hollering at God because of this. He's got a purpose in why He allows things to happen. His arm is not so short that He can't deliver me from this or deliver me through it. And it's His choice, which He does. And so we started looking at a few things, and when we noticed the more stress that I'm under, the worse the symptoms of this disease is.
The more stress you're under, the worse the symptoms.
And that seems to be pretty true with other people that we know that are going through this disease.
How did you deal with stress? Was it to try to avoid it, or did you try to understand and relate to it? What was your method of approaching that?
I'd say yes to both.
Okay, to both.
We try to understand what are the stressors, what's causing the stress, and then things that we can't control. What do we do about that? Do we just walk away from it? There was, I ran into a lot of problem going into Walmart for a while. The stress of all the commotion, all the mental stimulation coming in. It just get to the point I'd tell Vicki, I've got to go to the car. And I'd just go out to the car and wait on her. I just couldn't handle it. Well,
okay, now how quick did this kind of thing start happening because up to your diagnosis, except for that one incident, you really didn't have many symptoms or any consciousness of problems, did you?
Well, minor.
Okay.
And the diagnosis helped me start understanding, that's why these things that I couldn't explain, now I understand why that was.
That's what was happening.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But like the thing with the Walmart, I worked another year after I was diagnosed, which was probably longer than I should have, because you talk about stress. Out at the prison, it's a daily healthy dose of stress. And so I told Vicki about 60 days after I'd left working out there, I said, and got out from underneath stress, I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I feel pretty good now, Got out from underneath that.
And Vicki, I imagine having a husband at home all the time after the stresses of prison was probably a switch for you.
It was a big switch. And now he's the homemaker, I guess you could say, and I go to work.
So how did you feel about this thing and him trying to work with it? What was your role? How does a wife handle the idea when a husband comes home and suddenly says, I can't work any longer, I have Alzheimer's, and starts reading all the horrible news?
It was tough to handle for a while. It was because our life had become Alzheimer's, and you had to learn how to just settle into that and deal with it. It's a part of your life, but not let it become your life. And that was real difficult to do. But after time, I think we finally settled into it and just living life to the fullest, one day at a time, and just enjoying life. Ron's home all day by himself, and now it's what can I do, and just to get him out of the house, come home. We've changed that. Used to you come home from work and you stayed at home. Now you come home from work, I pick him up, and we'll just go out and run some errands or go out and eat. So he's not at home all day, because that makes a difference. Here you are, you've worked all of your life. I mean, he was working as a young child, as a young kid in the cotton fields, and that's all he knew was work. And all of a sudden it's just shut off, and now you're home. And yeah, he is involved with Alzheimer's, but still you're at home and no social life. And so it's just being aware of what he's going through each day.
You mentioned social life. How do your friends, when all of a sudden you lay the big Alzheimer's word on them, how do they respond? Did they tend to distance themselves from you, or is it a pity, oh my goodness, poor Ron, or how do friends act when you tell them that news?
Well, of course, most times shocked, and it does seem like for the most part, the initial thing is everybody pulls back because they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. You look just fine, you sound fine to them, everything looks normal. So what do we say? What's really going on behind the scenes? They don't know. And it's kind of, they just don't really know how to react. That's been a lot of the problem that I have seen, and myself included, was the ignorance to what this disease really is. Like I told you, I thought it was an old man sitting in a rocking chair drooling on himself. Okay, well, I do spend a lot of time in a rocking chair, and I'm getting to where when I sleep, I might drool on myself a little bit. So I don't know. I've got to be careful about that a little bit. But the point being, I became educated to the point of realizing, wait a minute. You mentioned the sentence that I had on me.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a death sentence. Mm-hmm. But the fun thing is when I got to looking, it doesn't have an execution date.
That's right.
So once you come to grips with that, then you say, okay, how can I live? How should I live? And you start realizing there's a lot of life to be lived. There's things I can't do that I used to could do. Okay, so what? There's still a lot I can do. And now, as regard to friends and people now, because they've seen the way we have reacted to it and seen the way we have embraced the life we have, not the disease, but the life that we have. And really, in so many ways, we have a better life now than we did before. Because so much of the time before, we were looking at, I've got to get this done and this done, and I'm planning on retiring at this age, or I'm planning on doing this in the future, and I'm planning on doing that. Well, wait a minute, I don't have a future guaranteed me. So we better look at what can we do today or tomorrow or the next day, and don't get too far off down in the future, and just enjoy it. So in so many ways, we have a better life today. There's a lot of complications involved. I'm not saying it isn't. But so our friends and people that know us now have come to realize, they're not defeated. They're not running scared. And so now people pretty much just treat me like they normally would and like they should. And, there's not much you're going to say nothing you're going to say is going to embarrass me or hurt my feelings. And I may use words wrong at the wrong time, and I may make misstatements a little bit. Generally, we catch them, but it's all something we just laugh about now.
Ron, you are absolutely incredible. The fact is, when I met you 8 years ago, I didn't think you'd be around 5 years, and here 8 years later, you're sitting here across the table talking to me, looking as normal and as healthy as anybody I have ever met. I think that is incredible. And more importantly, I think it gives it gives people who may be diagnosed with a problem an awareness that, hey, you can still live life and enjoy it to the fullest. And, you know, from the looks of you, I'd guess you've got another 10, 15, 20 years down the road ahead of you, because you certainly look great. I'm a little bit older than you are. I'm not going to say how much, but it's kind of funny to me when I'm talking to these younger kids, you know, the 40s and 45s, and they're using the wrong words, and they're forgetting things, and they're having difficulty remembering. You know, I feel like that's kind of the disease that we old folks have, the old timers disease. But the fact is, it seems that's rather common to all of us. But to be able to embrace a reality and to choose to live life in the face of it. I understand what Mark Freed said when he said, you are an inspiration to everybody. Anybody who gets a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, first of all, anybody who's having a problem, as you did, needs to have it checked and find out exactly what they're dealing with.
Yes, sir.
Because you cannot operate in ignorance. But once you get the diagnosis, it is not the end of it, but it is a chance for you to really face reality and sit down and work with it. Ron, I'll tell you what, I'm just so disappointed that our time is up, because this has been one incredible show, and you are one incredible person. I think the way you and Vicki have faced Alzheimer's disease and fought it and come through with the kind of success you are is absolutely amazing. And I want to encourage people, if you want to find out more about Ron, give me a phone call. I'm going to stay in touch with him and continue to follow this. You can reach me at 877-875-0990. I'm Glenn Howard. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to tell you not only about Ron, about any of our guests. And, you know, first of all, especially I also want to say thanks so much to our wonderful sponsors. UT Phone Company has been doing a great job with us for some time now, offering that discount phone service. If you want to save some money, give me a call and let me put you in touch with them, and I think they can do it for you. Anyway, our time is up. We've got to go. Ron, Vicki, thanks so much for coming in, being with us today. Your story about how to live with Alzheimer's and really to live with it has been an incredible story. I appreciate so much your being here. We got to go. We'll be back again this same time next week. Until then, be good to everybody. Do something nice for someone, especially yourself. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I've found ever since you've been around.